Just a few reminders about our house over here. We have our restrooms outside. We also have water, coffee, and tea at your disposal outside the auditorium. And through the morning, we're going to be here. After the lunch break, we're going to get together on the 8th floor. We have 2 emergency exits here in our auditorium. It's important for us to keep this in mind. Also, a request for us to leave our devices in silent mode. And I think about general information is about that. The next slide really fastly brings something really important for the British Council. The policies of British Council. We also want to talk about our commitment within a safe environment. Hope that no one feels abused or threatened. So I hope that we keep this in mind. And if anyone feels the need of reporting anything, you can use the code that is available here, or talk to Marcela from the British Council once more. After these initial reminders, I would like us to dedicate a few minutes for us to do a presentation round of everybody that is here presentially today. Most of our participants are online today. It's a tendency, as we were saying before we started, but many people are going to be with us online, but we have other people that are presentially here. So if we can just do a round of presentations telling our name and our institution, the institution that we're representing, and after this we're going to invite our winning universities to compose the table. Can I start with you, Luzima? Let's start with Lisandra because she's our host, right? Okay, and then after I will pass the floor to Luzima. My name is Lisandra Santos. I'm an analyst from CNPq since 2012. I work in the area of science and technology for 13 years now, and I work in this international cooperation board almost all the time that I was here in CNPq. I've worked in the advisory of the board after I worked in the prize department, and now I'm in the national coordination department. So in this department, we work with all the partnerships in states and foundations. We have many implementation programs with these institutes. We also work with the prize wallet of CNPq and also our training programs here in CNPq, all the programs of science and technology that are related to our entity. So I'm here to contribute with our institution. For whoever doesn't know, next year we're going to have an intense agenda celebrating 85 years of our institution. Thank you, Lisandra. My name is Vera Oliveira. I work in the British Council since 2019 in the Department of Higher Education and Science. Before this, I worked in the British Consulate, and I've worked with international affairs for around 6 or 7 years now, and usually related to education. This is an area that I have a special care. And thinking about other issues, I think that the British Council has a mentoring characteristic. So I also had the opportunity to develop issues related to public policies. My initial education was in international affairs, but after I specialized myself in public policies, and especially related to education in the state of São Paulo. I also had the opportunity to work with women in science. That is something that we consider really special in our projects. I believe it would be that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lucimar. Yes, it's working. Do I need to stand up? Okay, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Lucimar Oliveira. I am a technical administrative server from the University of Ceará for 19 years, and I work in the management of people. I have always managed people. My area of education is the area of administration. I have worked with capacity building, development of servers, and currently I am of equity, the diversity and inclusion management of people. It's a new area and we have this challenge of working with diversity, equity, gender policies, and it's in the scope of our work. So we are in this new management of the institution, and Anna is our vice dean that is here online. She's an enthusiast of this area of research, in this area of women in research. So we are trying to work together strongly to change our institution in regards to this profile, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much, Luzima. Good morning. My name is Paula Curi. I am from the Federal University Fluminense of Rio de Janeiro. I have been in the university since 2014, but I have a previous road and as a psychologist in the unified health system, and I work also as a professor in the university and in the space of women and maternity. So I have found a group of women, and they're here on the screen, and they're called Women in Science. And from this group, we started walking a path to have the women with equality in UF. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a psychologist, like I said before, and a professor in the Institute of Psychology. And I'm also in the coordination of the commission around 2 years. I'm a little bit lost in time now, but we have been developing over the years this work, and I think that this is what has helped us most. We are going to subscribe and to have a better and more equal university in this new procurement that we're going to launch. Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Lacerda Nunes, and I represent the University of Rio Grande do Sul. Since 2023, I am an advisory for sexuality that is in the pro-dean sector of research. It's important to say that it's a place, it's an area that goes cross-cuts all of the federal institutions, especially the research pro-dean center that is represented by Flavia. I think that after the presentations, we can talk about this more deeply. Good morning, everyone. My name is Flavia Tuvdovsky. I am from the Federal Institute like Laura. I am a pro-dean of research, innovation, and I am very happy to be here in CNPq. I am in the Federal Institute since 2010. It's an institution that started in 2008, and we will present it to you. It's different from the other universities, and I think that I speak English a little bit. I understand a little bit of French and German, but there are doubts about that. I speak Portuguese as well, thanks God. And I have many mentees in CNPq, young scientists, and it's really important to say that because I work in this area for 15 years, especially with women from basic education. So CNPq has been promoting girls in science with specific agendas. We work with that for a while, and this special one that we did with British Council was very important because we're still crawling when it comes to this area. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cássio de Almeida. I am in CNPq for almost 20 years, and I'm recently the coordinator for the award. So it's a pleasure to receive the awarded institutions here, and we hope that we have a very fruitful day. And we will talk a little bit more about the award afterwards. So I'm here with my team, with my staff, and I would like to give a good morning to everyone and congratulate everyone. And that's it. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Sandra Braga. I am a CNPq for 21 years old. I am an analyst, and in these 20 years, I have been the coordinator of applied education. And this is a coordination that has centralized all of the activities of women in science, and that has expanded in the other areas for decoy that I am acting in from the beginning in the execution of awards. It's a great pleasure to be with you as well. It's a privilege and an honor, although we have been seeing the girls here in the different events that were present in this science mode. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you again. Thank you so much, Sandra. Good morning. My name is Sofia Lotado. I am an intern here in CNPq for 1 year, and I am doing a communication in the University of Brasília. I think that I speak English too. And that's it. Thank you, Sofia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosani. I am from the coordinator and the coordination of awards. My name is Luis Carlos. I also am part of the coordination of awards. Thank you so much, Luis Carlos. Okay, so we now know everyone. Eddie, would you like to say something?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Bom dia. I'm trying to practice my Portuguese. That's getting better every day, but still not quite there. So I'm Edward Vogel. Everybody calls me Eddie. I represent People First International. So we're lucky enough to have been working with the British Council for a number of years now. I know some of you in the audience already and some of you online as well. And just very happy to see you all in this second workshop and hoping we have a great day and looking forward to it.
Obrigada. Bom.
Okay. So we all get to know each other now. So now we would like to invite the representatives from our awarded institutions for us to start the presentations that they have been able to provide to us in this first moment of the event.
Então a Paula vai falar primeiro.
So Paula is going to speak for the firstly. We're going to have 15 minutes for each of them for the presentations.
Os slides vão estar em português.
And the slides are going to be in Portuguese. We can say everything in Portuguese because we have simultaneous interpretation. So there is no problem. So thank you so much, Paula. All right, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here representing UFI and sharing with you this award that is so important in the history of the fight of the women regarding equality. inequity. So my name is Paula Cudi, as I had presented myself before, and I'm going to speak a little bit more about the proposal of today. When I was going to do this presentation, I started to think about where I could start. I'm going to start by the end. Ufi really likes to play around with the order of things, so I'm going to start with the end, like Fiona. Why start with the end or with the closing remarks? Well, because it's important for us to talk about this. And before, we used to talk about what is the university, how it organizes itself, and to put in the scene or in the center stage what we are doing little by little. So, what have we done as a group in CPEG? That the university, regardless of the different actions that we have implemented and abetted in, continues as its origin a little bit full of males, heteronormative, elitist, and colonizer. It colonizes the knowledge. So we tend to make a decision, this break, which is not truthful. I am a professor that always makes this extension, a conversation between the university and the society, and we ask ourselves, but the university isn't the society. It is the society with everything that the society has. So this is a lesson learned that is really important. So as CPEG, we see the reproduction of the sexist and other types of discriminations that still exist. Also, other aggravations like the sickness of the mental health, and we notice the impacts for for the jobs, and the discussion of gender is so difficult in the university. And it's curious because it's a university, which is where we would suppose that this would be simpler, but it isn't. So it's not really about a lack of privilege or because people still don't know enough of it to make huge transformations. Of course, there is something missing. It's a pathway. But how can we talk about gender without talking about the privilege? And we feel a huge resistance in working with the systems of privilege that we need to talk about when we talk about equality. And we cannot give up. We need to be resilient. We need to take care of the community. And we have focused a lot on the care, especially with this talk that I'm bringing with the care for the community, because the institution doesn't exist. It exists from those that make the institution. So we need to take care of the people that make the institution. So next one, please. There you go. So, making a brief diagnosis of the institution itself, from what we have followed, the roles of gender have been reproduced in the university and in our daily lives. We have been seeing that there is no parity of gender in the management areas. It's better, but it's still not enough. So we have never had a dean before, and we don't discuss this institution, this at all. So this is a place that is usually for men. And we reproduce a sentence that my mother used to say, it's a great woman behind a great man. This is what is reproduced in the social life of the Brazilian university. Of course, that the logic that operates is still very masculine. We notice these differences that exist in the literature, in the articles that are going to show the care that is always occupied mostly by women, and we see all of the effects there. It's in our face, although not everyone wants to see it. So we have been discussing a lot in the policies of motherhood, and we think that the motherhood policies are more palatable. Gender, whenever we talk about gender, and when we talk about motherhood, it's better. But I also think how difficult it is for us to have this criteria of correction that we were able to implement in the university and in the policies that are effectively understood. So it's in the previous one. They are accepted, but always with a little bit of difficulty. So sometimes it's to just give benefits for themselves. And when we say that it's to give benefits for themselves, they didn't understand anything. So can we go back one slide, please? Just for us to continue. All right. So we noticed that the policies of maternity and scientists and so on, it's the care that we have here as an object. So we have the systems of privilege. There's a difficulty for us to understand. We have all of the violences based on gender-based violence. All of the kinds, from the most subtle ones to the more severe ones, they appear little by little in a way that is really explicit and really tough. It doesn't make a huge difference, but we need to think about all of the issues and the more private matter of it. It's not such a difference than watching the news, seeing the gender-based violence that we see all the time. So in this case, we have advanced with motherhood with different policies. And we have been having more children in the different institutions and having a place for the woman to do breastfeeding, but we need to take care of what that is as well. We cannot consider motherhood as just a whole system for all of the women. Up to what point we are condescending to the policies of maternity as well, and to reinforce standards for the society. So in regards to motherhood, we have another important issue. We have mother leave. Okay, there are factors of correction. Okay, but that cannot impact in the daily universe of the university. How can we not impact the daily activities in the same way that we see that on one side, if we are able to say that it's important to have a policy for motherhood, many times we see women, mothers, servers as objects of violence because they are women, because the violence goes beyond this issue of the work itself. Next one, please. Next slide. There you go. Okay. So thinking about what we have been occupying ourselves with the most, we have been seeing how we work with gender policies in the proposal that we take to the universities. We had an interest in advancing in the discussions of gender violence, and from 2023, 2024, until we finished this policy, we advanced in it, but not so marked in the purple guide, but thinking about how we're going to create a space to be able to break the barriers and to enter in these areas to see if the violence against women and other types of discrimination, thinking about the access that the purple guide gives us, but how we can think about a pathway for support. So for us, prevention is fundamental. And the treatment for the ombudsman as well is really important for us to denounce as well, the prevention and so on.
We're really worried with the issue of welcoming, because there we get in another discussion that involves Attorney General's office and other institutions, but there is something that we can do to change this idea alongside the prevention. Okay, so advancing the slide, please. So I put in here what we started doing in a really important way, trying to show a journey. A journey that starts in a starting point with no so much pretension. Let's see what is going to happen. Let's create a super high-level technology, an email, and then let's see what happens. Then after we created the email, we received an email that brought a really serious situation involving two students. Well, what was our second step? That after we transformed this in our protocol, we do an appointment that can be remote or presentially, understanding that we're distributed in our state. We have many campuses, but we're also understanding a few things that come from our experience, from our living. I worked for a long time in our healthcare system, and I was a psychologist, and when women were pregnant and had their kids, they used to say, "Oh, I never want to come back here because here's a place that I suffer a lot." And we would have a room over there, and we started to listen. No, we want to do this in a remote way because I don't want to go close to this place because I don't like it. So we started creating remote appointments, and the ones that would happen presentially wouldn't happen there, would happen in another place. And I'm working at an institute that we had offices there, so we would create this appointment in the office in a more private way, without people doing this relation with the dean's office. And I think that this was a strategy that we used that worked really well. So we appoint a meeting of orientation, and it happens with me and Carla, that is on the screen. And me as a psychologist and Carla in the area of law, we're worried we're worried about
fazendo
healing
orientações
women
tanto
that
no âmbito dos
that
cuidados, né, com
get
saúde
their
mental, né, a
taking
gente,
care
enfim, eu
of their
tenho
mental health
alguma,
and
bastante experiência, né,
their
das questões
needs. We have
relacionadas
a lot
às
of
políticas de
experience
enfrentamento às violências
things
contra as
that are
mulheres,
related to
né,
facing
enquanto política pública, então conheço um pouco a avaliação de risco e tal, então a rede,
facing
né,
this
e aí a gente acaba
violence
fazendo
that
esse
women suffer.
trabalho de orientar
So we usually do this
para
job
o
trying
cuidado, quanto para o que a
to
gente
take
entende
care
enquanto caminho a ser trilhado
and try
dentro
to
da
understand the
instituição
journey that
e
needs to
fora,
be chosen
né?
inside
Para
the
ser assim
institution
desejado,
and
porque algumas
outside of
coisas
the
são
institution.
né? Então tem o fora, que a gente coloca como possível. O que a gente vai vendo
Because we have things that happen
é
outside the
que
institution
as
also.
pessoas têm muita
So
dificuldade, muitas vezes, né, nem sabem que viveram
we
a
notice
violência,
that
estão quase
sometimes people have
procurando
a hard
ajuda para
time
que isso seja
understanding that they
nomeado.
suffered this
Reclamam
violence.
muito das tentativas de caminhos sem êxito feitas, né? Ninguém leva
They
a sério,
complain
né?
a lot
Dentro da própria
about
instituição, mas a gente
unsuccessful
também teve boas surpresas, assim, coordenadores de curso, chefes
tryings,
de
and
departamento, diretores de unidades
we
que
had different
pediram
people,
reuniões
coordinators, chief
conjuntas
departments,
para que
that
a gente
asked for
pudesse construir
joint
junto um
meetings so that
caminho
we
de
could build
cuidado a seguir.
together a path
E
that we
nesse
should follow.
caminho, a gente tem uma coisa que a gente vem fazendo,
And in this path,
que é
there's
certo
something that we're doing
entendimento de que
that
para a
is an
gente falar de
understanding
equidade, para a gente falar de
for us
cuidado, a
to be
gente tem que
able
falar de
for us to
autonomia,
be able to talk
né?
about equity. We need to talk
Embora
about
a
autonomy.
legislação ela vai dizer um bocado que a gente tem o dever
Even
de
though
fazer
our
por uma
legislation
pessoa, fazer
says that
pelo outro,
have
fazer
the
pela mulher, no caso,
obligation of doing
fazer pela
something
mulher é colocar ela
for
no âmbito de
women,
uma tutela, é não fazer uma aposta na capacidade de agência dela, de pensar, inclusive, quais são os
and
caminhos
doing this is
possíveis
about
para ela.
thinking what
Então, a
are the
gente tem
possible paths
trabalhado
for
numa
them. So
dimensão de poder
we're
fazer os
working in a dimension
atendimentos
where we can
quantos forem
create
necessários
as many
para que a
appointments
mulher
as
se
necessary so that
internalize e
women
consiga lá
can
arrumar, né, e ver quais as ferramentas que ela
see
tem
what type
para
of
poder,
tools they
então,
have
caminhar.
so that they can
Essas
walk.
ferramentas, elas não são só concretas, não é vai no
We
SEI,
don't
vai
only
para a
have
ouvidoria. Tem ferramentas
concrete
subjetivas. A
tools.
gente
We
está
also have
pensando em
subjective
como a
tools,
gente trabalha para
and we're thinking
diminuir
in a
o
way that we
impacto
can
das
work
violências
to
sofridas.
decrease the impact of the violence that is suffered.
Slide, por favor, gente.
Acho que eles não estão conseguindo passar sempre.
The slides guy, please.
Né, então, assim, falando um pouco, né, autonomia enquanto princípio, que é
So,
central,
talking about
como a
autonomy
gente
as a
trabalha,
principle,
acolhimento e escuta qualificada como princípios
welcoming
também. A
and
gente vai
qualified
buscando
hearing as
soluções
principles. Also,
que
we're searching
talvez
for
possam
solutions
ser
that
idealmente eficazes para
maybe
cada
can be
uma das
effective
pessoas que
ideally
nos
for each
procura, ou
one
seja,
of
não tem muito
the
como
people
criar
that
um protocolo,
search
porque
for
cada
us.
vai ter
There isn't we
uma
can't create an
resposta,
exact protocol because we're going
caminhos
to
que
have a
vão ser
different answer for
percorridos,
each
mas a gente tenta
situation and
construir
different
vínculos de
paths
confiança com a
that are
mulher,
going to be taken, but we try to
realizando
create
então essa
a
escuta
bond of
atenta,
trust
por
with
favor.
these women with an active hearing.
Sim, mais 3 slides.
Não, vou falar rápido, então.
Slide, por favor.
Entendi.
Enfim, aí um pouco, né, falando do que a gente encontrou, né, nesse percurso, que
So
não é tão
talking about
longo, mas a
what
gente,
we're
eu já falei,
facing
a
in
gente
this
encontra
journey,
muitas violências de todos
like
os
we said,
tipos.
we're facing
A
many
gente
types of
imaginou que
violence,
num cenário em que a violência mais verticalizada
and we
podia estar aparecendo, não
imagined that
foi,
we could
mas
find
também não somos
a
ingênuos
scenario where
de achar que não
violence is a little bit more
existe. Ainda
vertical. It
não
wasn't what we
chegamos,
found
ou
actually,
não
but
chegou, né? A gente está aí num
we need to
âmbito
understand that
muito
this is
de
not something that
diversas
doesn't
violências
exist,
entre pares,
okay?
né?
We have
A
many
gente
different
tem visto
types
muita
of violence
violência
between
cibernética,
pairs and couples.
perseguição,
So
isso vem ganhando um
we
lugar
also
muito
have a lot of
importante.
cyber
A gente já
violence that
teve até, enfim, ameaças de
starting to
morte,
have
ameaças misóginas, enfim. E a
bigger
gente tem
incidents.
ainda pensando, né? A gente está pensando o cuidado com cuidado, né?
And
Cuidando com cuidado.
we're
Então, a
thinking
gente oferece, então, esse
about
espaço para
our
dizer que
care
não estão
with a
só,
lot
que
of care
estão
also.
juntas.
So
A
we
gente
want
tem
these women
adotado
to know that they're not
práticas
alone,
interdisciplinares com uma perspectiva
and
interseccional. A gente
we're
considera,
adopting
né, isso.
interdisciplinary
A gente
practices
tem
also.
estabelecido relações
We're trying
empáticas e
to
muito baseadas em
establish
sororidade e a
bonds that
singularidade
are
do cuidado.
based in
Isso tem sido
empathy and the
fundamental.
singularity
O
of
cuidado
care.
também
This has
de
been
poder dar caminhos como
fundamental. The
funciona
care for us to
para
create
se
paths
conseguir se cuidar para fora, né? Às vezes o encaminhamento
to
para uma
be able
rede
to
de
take
cuidado,
care
um
of
atendimento
ourselves
psicológico,
outside also.
uma ida a um
Sometimes
centro
in a certain
especializado, a gente vai
network
dando
or in a
esses caminhos,
specialized
né, para que elas
center.
possam se
So we
cuidar.
try to give different paths so these women
Slide,
can
por
take care
favor.
of themselves. Next slide, please.
O último, então. E aí, por fim, né,
And
tem um caminho
to
aí, né, do que
finish,
fazemos ao que
we have
queremos,
a
né?
path
Então, assim, eu vou
towards
desenhar pedras
what
no
we
caminho,
do and
né?
what we want.
Primeiro, a gente vai ter que
We have a few
sustentar essa
stones in our
estrutura para a mudança
path,
de uma
but
cultura
we need to
institucional, né? Isso não é fácil.
sustain.
Mudar a cultura não é qualquer coisa.
We
Mas
need to
a gente,
change this
de
culture
forma
inside our
seguinte, né?
institution.
Às
So
vezes,
we're
sendo
we're firm
olhadas
and
como
strong.
aquelas
Sometimes we're
feministas
seen as those
esquisitas, para não dizer
strange
doidas,
feminists, not to say
né? Assim, mas
crazy,
tudo bem. E ok, somos,
but
e daí?
okay,
Vamos
yes, we
seguinte.
are, and we're gonna
A
continue.
gente, quando, né, eu fiz o slide, né, a gente
When
dava
I
aí as
created
voltas, né, com o
this
que queremos
slide,
uma superintendência de equidade e inclusão,
we
mas no
were
dia 5, no Conselho
talking about
Universitário,
what we
foi criado
wanted, but
a
on
Superintendência de
the day
Equidade e
5th,
Inclusão,
we created the
uma
superintendency of
estrutura que é muito
inclusion
importante, né?
that is a
Isso,
structure that is
quando
really
a CEPEG se
important.
constituiu enquanto comissão, a
When
gente
CPEG
nunca
was
entendeu que
instituted as a
não se tratava de uma comissão, o que a gente
committee, we
entendia
talked that
que
this
deveria
wasn't
ser.
just a
Então, é
committee. We talked
passo
about
muito
what we understood
importante,
that
né?
it needed
Aquilo
to be.
que
So this
um
is a really
dia a
important
gente
step
sonhou, se materializa,
towards what we
e agora
dreamt
o sonho
one
precisa
day.
ir para a prática, né? E aí
And now we need
vira
to
um pouquinho
transform
pesadelo,
this
né? Ai,
dream
meu
in
Deus, que
practice.
coisa é essa que agora a gente vai ter que construir,
And
né?
sometimes we're a
Mas
little
que é
bit afraid
fundamental,
of
é o
what we
nosso
need to
sonho.
build, but it's
A comissão não
fundamental.
bastava para a gente.
It's our dream, and
E a
a
gente
committee
tem
wasn't enough for us.
discutido a criação do núcleo especializado da ouvidoria, que a gente
And
colocou
we're
no
creating the
plano, né? Dizendo
specialized
o
center,
acompanhamento e
trying
supervisão das denúncias. A gente não tem acesso aos
to
processos pelo modo como funciona
coordinate the
a
accesses. We
ouvidoria,
don't.
né, as formas como, mas a gente entende que seria muito importante que algum tipo
We
de
understand that it's
acompanhamento
really
e revisão
important
fosse
to do
feita
some type of
para que a gente tivesse
supervision
certo
so
retorno,
that we can
para
have
não
an
caísse
answer, an
num
output.
lugar que a gente também não pudesse viabilizar o quanto a política de
In a place
enfrentamento
that we
ela está ganhando
couldn't make
corpo
this
e está
facing
sendo eficaz
in a
e ao
place where
mesmo
this
tempo
face
o
where this
quanto
facing
o
policy
trabalho
has
da
been
gente, né,
effectable and
está
at the same time
funcionando,
has been
né? Seria
effective and at the
bom
same time
balizador para pensar
to
esse
see that our
monitoramento
job is
dessa
working.
política. É isso.
Último slide.
O
Obrigada,
último
Paula.
slide é só os contatos,
de
enfim, né,
contatos.
para quem...
Gente, uma salva de palmas para Paula.
A round of applause for
Obrigada por
Paula,
compartilhar
please.
com a gente. Parabéns
Thank
pelo
you for
caminho.
sharing with us.
Foi um bom timing, passando só um pouquinho.
Só um pouquinho, tá
Eu
bom.
vou já passar a palavra para a Flávia e para a Laura.
And
e para
I'm
mais
going to
15
pass the
minutos
floor
de
to
apresentação.
Flavia and Laura for more 15 minutes of presentation.
Bom, então, bom dia a todos e a todas.
Good morning to all once more. It's a pleasure to be here today. And we're going to present a little bit of our federal institute that we call IFRS. We always like to say who we are. This is why we have the map over here. Each one of these circles is one of our camps. We already have 19, and we're implementing more too. For whoever doesn't know, this was an institution that was created in 2008 by President Lula. In 2010, we started the implementation of campuses in all country.
Então, o Brasil ganhou mais 100, Instituto Federal mais
Campus.
12, então somamos hoje 19. A gente tem uma reitoria, ela fica na Serra Gaúcha,
So we have
no
more
município de
two
Bento
now.
Gonçalves.
We have
Não está bem ali no meio do estado, mas
one
tá
that is
pouquinho maior,
located,
umas letras um pouquinho
our dean
maiores.
is located in Bento
Então,
Gonçalves.
essa reitoria ela acaba cuidando de todos os campi, a gente
So
trabalha
the
com
dean's office
acessibilidade
takes
nos
care of
campi e
all
extensão. O
camps.
nosso diferencial é ter a
And what we
educação
have that is
desde a
different
educação
is that
básica.
we
Então, a
have
gente tem
education
ensino
since
médio
basic
integrado,
education.
profissionalizante,
We have
temos
high
as
school
faculdades,
integrated.
né? Então, as graduações, e
We
temos
also have
pós-graduação também. A
higher
gente tá
education.
hoje com 7 mestrados
So we
e
have
tentando
7
implementar,
master
começando a fazer uma
degrees, and we're
proposta
trying to
para
implement a
doutorado.
proposal for
Então,
PhD
temos também o
also.
EJA, então a gente atende
We
também
also have
a comunidade que nos
EJA.
cerca, né? Então, o diferencial é a gente estar no interior do estado através de cursos EJA.
So
Então,
we're
EJA
trying
FIC
to
e
be
muitas vezes pega o
inside our
ensino
states with
fundamental. Pode passar, por
EGA
favor, slide.
institutes. It's a program for elders that didn't finish their fundamental school.
Enquanto ele vai passando o slide, a gente tem... Eu acho que ele fugiu de lá, tá, gente?
I
O outro
think
slide
that
ele vai contar um
Ulysses
pouco
ran
do
away,
nosso
but
caminho, né? Então,
the other slide is
como a
gonna,
gente
if we can
acaba
pass the
achando
slide, please.
no prêmio, né? Muito obrigada. É pelas nossas políticas institucionais e, obviamente, pelo marco de adesão
So we
que é a
have
proposta do prêmio, né? Então,
our milestone
fomos
that is
então
the proposal
instaurados
of
em
this
2008,
award.
os
So
campos em
we established in
2010, esses são de algumas
2008
escolas técnicas
camps,
que
and in
existiam,
2010
e a
a
gente
few technical
começa a
schools that
trabalhar
existed,
na
and
questão
we
de ações
started to
afirmativas no
work
ano de
with
2014.
affirmative
Então, a gente tem aí a
issues in the year
proposta
of
de uma política de ações
2014. So we
afirmativas, e
have
isso
a
vai se
policy
refletir nas cotas que a gente tem para
of
os estudantes
affirmative
adentrarem a
policies.
nossa instituição. Nós temos 10 diferentes tipos de
We have
cotas,
10 different
desde
type of
LPCD,
quotas.
indígenas,
People with
pardos,
deficiency,
baixa renda.
indigenous
Isso
people.
ele vai se diversificar. Então, uma delas é acesso
One of the
universal.
quotas that we
Então, aquele
have,
estudante que advém
one of the
de
ways of
escola
access is the
privada.
universal
No ano de
access.
2016, a
And in the
gente
year of
instituiu o respeito à
2016,
identidade
we
de gênero, né?
instituted
Então, o
the
estudante ele
respect
pode ter o seu nome
to
social.
gender
A única diferença é
equality.
que, como a gente
So
trabalha na educação
the
básica,
student can
esse
have
nome
his
não tem
social name,
prioridade.
but
Então, os pais
if
têm que
he is in
assinar e
basic
exigir. Então, o meu filho
basic education under
chama
18,
o nome que desejar.
their parents need to
Temos em
be
2020 a política de prevenção e
according to
combate
it.
ao assédio e às violências,
We also
né?
have the
Então,
program
o
of
Instituto Federal
struggling
aqui do
against
Brasil, ele tem
violence.
isso estabelecido. O
We
programa de
established this in
dignidade
our
intelectual
institutes.
no ano de 2022, isso também foi um marco. Então, prevê a distribuição de produtos de higiene.
We
Então, a
also
gente
have
faz isso
a hygiene
para todos os
program related
nossos
to
estudantes, né? Então, a Lauren hoje é
menstrual
já assessora de
situations. We
gênero,
have
ela
Laura that
está
is
à frente dessa pasta. Depois vocês vão ver, ela vai
that
falar
is
bem
in this
especificamente
department,
sobre
and
isso.
she's going to talk
A gente tem
specifically
uma estrutura
about this.
normativa de apoio às estudantes
We have a
lactantes, né, em
support.
2024. Então, isso instituiu os estudos domiciliares, então
We have
garantindo
programs related to
essa
breastfeeding also,
política. E a
trying to
assessoria de gênero e
guarantee this
sexualidade, então essa também
policy,
foi criada
and
no ano de
also
2021. Pode passar o slide,
gender
por favor.
equality. This was created in 2021. Next slide, please.
Então, enquanto o slide ele é passado, então como a gente trabalha ali com ensino, pesquisa e extensão, a gente
When we're
sentou,
talking
né, a gente
about
resolveu trazer para essa
extension
apresentação
research, we tried to bring
estruturar
to
a
this
nossa descrição,
presentation
né, por que a gente
something that is
submeteu a
out
nossa
in
proposta
our
do IFRS
description and
e
why
que a
we
gente
submitted to the
tentou mostrar um pouco
proposal
do
of
que a gente faz em cada
IFRS.
dos nossos
We tried
pilares.
to
Então,
show a
dentro do
little bit of
ensino,
what we
a
do
gente
in
já
each
tem
of our
a
pillars.
diversidade e
We have a
inclusão, ela
workshop
ocorre a
of
cada 2
diversity and
anos,
inclusion that
reunindo todos
happens
os
each
nossos
2
campi,
years,
o
and it
instituto
includes
leva eles.
all our
Geralmente
camps.
ocorre na cidade de Bento Gonçalves, a gente tem um campus
Usually it
lá,
happens in the
então a
city of
gente acolhe os
Bento
nossos
Gonçalves,
colegas
where we welcome
nesse
our
workshop,
colleagues in
onde a
this
gente
workshop,
discute quais são as práticas
and where we
que a
discuss
instituição
practices that
acredita.
the institution
Formação
believes
continuada
in.
para servidores e estudantes também
We had a
sobre a
continuous
necessidade de prevenção de
training
violências,
for
porque cada
students
dos campi
trying to
tem
prevent violences, because each campus has a
pessoas com deficiências, tem núcleo de
center that has
PCIs, né,
people with
então afros
deficiency or
e indígenas, NAP
with
e
disabilities,
tags, né? Então, gênero e sexualidade. Então, cada dos campi tem
and
as
each
pessoas que vão trabalhar
camp
dentro dessas
has
perspectivas.
specific
Então, todas as
professionals
Lauras,
to
agora eu
work
falo em
with
nome da
different
Laura, que é
perspectives. And now I can
a nossa
talk in
assessora.
Laura's
Dentro
name,
da
that is
pesquisa,
our
então, a gente
advisor.
vem promovendo, então,
But
editais de
inside this
promoção da
research,
ciência
we
e também
we promoted different programs like the award for Women's in Science, but other things also in partnership with CNPq. And this last year, we participated through IFRS with one camp, and we also got in with the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. So we were leading a really big project of women in science in the south of our country. It's a really big network. So we carry more than 200 awards in IFRS with our students. We believe in this initiative that we want to put women to develop scientific programs. We also have a partnership with CNPq and SBPC, that is the award Carolina Body. And we had 3 girls from basic education that were present since the first opportunity, and these students were recognized in this award. So we wanted to show that we also give incentives and we give scholarships to these girls. So meanwhile, we don't have this gender equality. I think that these proposals are trying to promote this, and we're having a few results related to it. The same student that won the award of Young Scientist through CNPq, Juliana Stradioto, she was present in the Nobel Prize in Stockholm. So we wanted to bring here this idea that this scientific
place for the women and girls, for spreading the news about CNPq. And please pass the floor. So in here we have put a project that is representing the junior prize that is from Stockholm. 2 students from the basic education developed pads, women pads, and when we launched these pads for all of the women, they developed their sustainable pad and safe for the region, and Laura and Camille were able to have several recognitions, not only nationally but internationally, also being representative of our institutions. So I'm going to pass the floor to Laura, that is going to show other initiatives that we also have in FRS. Thank you so much, Flavia. We've had taken this decision of starting this trajectory with research and extension projects, because I understand, and Flavia as well, and FRS as well, and we need to understand it this way. Gender issues and women in science goes through all of the areas of the institution, from the education, extension, and other areas was our care to look at all of these 3 areas, and also the management, because the creation of the Gender Sexuality Institute is it's a paramount importance for us in the creation of this advisory, and the pro-dean of education that we are in. Flavia is from the Protein Institute of Research, and FRS is really worried about gender, sexuality, and we wanted to purpose and to cross-cut all of the areas of education. So I would also like to say that I would like to do a self-biography addition. I am very proud to be here. I am a former young student that had a pathway in the first PBQ scholarship in the University of Santa Maria. And I am very, very happy to be here. I am not from the area of mathematics and of the exact science and technology However, in the humanities, we also face many challenges. And I would just like to say that I am very happy. So I'm sorry to make this confession here, but I'm really happy, very proud to be here. In the extension project, we also have empowerment women programs with 550 spots given to vulnerable women, with more 500 spots given by the government. So the ProDean Institute is helping this more and more. We also have the engineers encounters that is happening every year. They gather around and they set these marks. The PROACs from 2024, number 8, had a support to extension projects that are behaved for the quota students. And we like to bring all of the different areas, and we can now pass the slide, please. Would you like to add anything else here, Flavia? Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about infrastructure and inclusion. Since 2023, my objective was to touch on a few infrastructure-ish points. The nuclei for the gender and diversity that we have in the 7 campi, they demanded different structural-ish changes. We did the universal toilets that are implemented in all of the campi, and we also have the distribution of pads and workshops for education in all of the campi, and we also have kits for sexual and menstrual education and the diversity of the campi, so that we have this commitment. I'm going fast because of the time frame. Here we have one place for breastfeeding in Banco Gonçalves, and the doctor that gave a course on sexual education and menstrual education. We have baby changing rooms in all of the campi, and Bruna Novaes has done a great material. She's a plastic artist, and we distributed that in all of the campi. You can go on. And the internal policies, we have the access to the different agendas and folders for facing gender-based violence. We have done different informs for the different shelters until 2024. You can go through the next one.
Então, nós tivemos as enchentes no Rio Grande do Sul no ano de 2024, que impactaram diretamente nas nossas formações e capacitações
And so the capacity building, we have been doing that for all of the campi. And one of the campuses that have converted in different floods, had a flood, we had to do a shelter for this campuses, and we have distributed that for the people that were suffering abuse to go to the different channels and to have this services held for them. So this is our folder that is distributed for menstrual dignity. You can continue. We have a project that is going on since 2000 of all of the women in science. So this is an approach for all of the areas of FRS, and we are guaranteeing the representation of these students and servers of FRS so that we could have the policies of gender-based violence combat in the light of this discussion. For the award,
E também submetemos não apenas
we need to submit that.
Prêmios e tudo que a Flávia trouxe no âmbito da pesquisa, mas também as
Flavia has also talked about the infrastructure differences that we have been working on in FRS as well.
Então, ali são os objetivos do projeto, né? A gente quer gerar dados para
So we need to generate data for the internal services, parentality, the inclusion for trans people, and the reduction of gender violence. We intend to do data analysis in April of 2026, and here is the QR code for our survey. This is a survey that is only internal. So at this moment, we have these surveys that are going to be applied, and it's in a very challenging phase. Now you can go to the next slide, please. Sorry.
Bom, jornada institucional, sucessos e lições
So,
aprendidas.
what are the journeys of success? And for isolated areas, we needed to have a better integration of this equality and different policies. The infrastructure and research needs to be also rethought, because we cannot do any infrastructure if we don't have the support of all of the areas. We are still in the pathway for consolidating the Gender and Sexuality Institute that goes cross-cuts all of the institute. You can go on. So the lessons learned, the institution commitment needs to also be based on science. We have a few data, but we still are going after this gender and sexuality topics. And usually the collaboration of research, management, and the PEGs, and our nuclei of servers that are at the campus or the campuses are the base of our work. The main work is in the basis, and we need to think politically the centrality of the agenda of sexuality and gender. So it can't be something peripheral. These different frameworks and different milestones, they help and renew our strengths. And we hope that the formation that is, the education that is provided from the British Council are able to qualify our researchers more and more, not only our researchers, but our institutional practices, because we have ombudsman and we have a denouncement channel for the gender violence and the sexuality issues as well, and they have challenges as well. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigada, Laura e Flávia. E para fechar esse painel,
so to close this panel, I'm now going to call Luzimar from the Federal University of Ceará that is going to give her points of view. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? So it's a huge pleasure to be here and for the great favas that have preceded me, great speeches that were able to come before me. We were talking about we've seen the local challenges, and we recognize ourselves with the challenges of the other institution. I saw myself in the speech of Paula. I'm even going to mention a few things that are extremely similar to their reality. As I said, my name is Luzimar Oliveira. I am in the Federal University of Ceará for almost 20 years as a technical administrative server, and my background is in administration, and I have always been managing people in general. On the Federal University of Ceará is an autarky and linked to the Ministry of Education. This is a picture of our dean office, which is a building that is really marking in Ceará. For those that goes through the 13 de Maio Avenue, they always look at this building and they admire this building because indeed it's very beautiful. It's our pink home, and it is our framework, our milestone in the architecture of Ceará. We have completed 70 years, so it's very close to the University of Paula with their challenges. It's a university that has a trajectory that is extremely conservatory, as the majority of the campuses are, and that we only think that there's just a progressive campus, but we know that it's not like that, and this is also a challenge, especially when it comes to implementing the policies of diversity, inclusion, and equity. So let's go back to one slide, please, just for me to show you the size of the university in terms of how we are. In Fortaleza, we possess the campuses of Pisica, Pissaranguçu, and we have Sobral, Quixadá, Crateús, Russos, and Tapajé. The headquarters is in Fortaleza, like I said. In regards to the institutional numbers in terms of size, servers, and so on, you can go to the next one. So we have a balance regarding gender, men, women. We have more than 50% of representation between technicians and administrative body. This is a little bit bigger than ours. So for us to be able to follow the work of such a huge university as this, to talk about the history that I am representing and on top of. So the diversity agenda was created a while ago, 2 years ago, with the change of management of the dean office. It was discussed the creation for the first time of a unit, a formal unit of the organogram of the institution that would work in these topics in an institutional manner. We know that we work with these topics when it comes to the research, to the extension projects, but in the formal structure of the institutions, there was no unit that would discuss this policies of EDI. So Professor Diana, that is here online, that is present here with us, has initiated this discussion of creation of this formal unit. And in this discussion, they started to discuss where this division would be, where it would be located. In the first moment, there was a unit of the protein of innovation, and the discussion evolved to also put that in management, people management as well. So we have this difference to be inside the people's management team. So at first, the policies that we are discussing and that we have been implementing in the different actions are directed to our workforce, and that end up impacting all of the academic sector. So if we work with our servers, administrative and technicians, and the policies of EDI, for sure, it will reach the student, it will reach all of the academic sector. You can skip to the next slide, please. So I have brought here the timeline of EDI. The division was created in 2023. In November, we are 2 years old now. And from the creation, We have been doing before the team was only 2 of us, and now we started visiting the different units of UFC so that we would be able to see how the equity inclusion was being worked on in the different units. So I'm going to talk about a curious topic. We went to our CT, which is our technological center, where we have the engineering and campuses. And when we reached the board, something that called our attention was the wall that had the pictures of the former directors. And when we go there, we are impacted. Why? Because there are several pictures of men, and they are white, only men, in all of the different years of being a director. And at the end, there was our Vice Dean, Professor Diana, that was the first woman to be the director in our technological center. So that is something that comes to our eyes.
And it makes us reflect about this gender issue inside of the exact science, because it's a university with 70 years, with the quantity of servers and students that are entering the engineering course. And just a few moments ago was the first time that we had a women's leadership discussing issues inside the institution. So just like the University of Palva, we never had a woman dean. And for the first time, we're having a woman as a dean, that is Professor Diana. So we need to foster these topics inside our institutions. We did a cooperation to offer a workshop anti-racism. We created a program to combat racism inside the institution. We know that it exists, but it was really beautiful to see this workshop happening, because we started working with people of the patrimonial guard. The first person that you see when you reach the university, they have a direct contact with students, and we had lots of reports of racism situations between students, and many times they didn't even recognize themselves as Black people. They started to recognize themselves as Black people after this workshop. So many times they would ask, why did you choose us? Because we are racist? And so it's a delicate situation, especially because it's related to security. It's a delicate area. So we also offered the same workshop to all servers, and we pretend on widening this action. We also did an institutional event of EDI to create our positioning and what's the EDI that we want to represent in our institution. We called all units to do this construction. We also created an EDI newsletter that goes to all emails. Every month we choose a subject and a server for us to honor, and we reply this to all servers with a cultural agenda, launching books related to this topic. We had the award Women in Science by CNPq. We were really happy with this award. It represents the beginning of this work, with a training for servers related to EDI also, and the welcoming of new servers with a seminar that is turned to EDI. We also did actions in the month of pride. We did a partnership with the dean with the colors of the rainbow. Our institution already called the attention for it being pink, and it called even more with all the colors of the rainbow. It was the first time that it happened. And the award of gender equality, that was an award that was given by our state. We were really happy with this award. And now we're organizing the first Black November of UFC. At this moment, we have many actions to celebrate the struggle against racism and also the racial equality. Next slide, please. I wanted to bring in a more detailed way issues about our prize. We had 17,000 subscriptions with 135 new servers. We also had 127 of them participating in the seminar, and 79 of them are assistants in administration. And we chose this because we had never approached the subject about gender, race, LGBT. So we tried to force these training courses that prepare these servers. We forced them to discuss these topics, and people try to understand and study about this topic, so that when these people would arrive, these universities, they would already know about this subject. And I was part of the organization. I participated directly in this seminar, and it was beautiful to be able to see how these new servers got in the institution super happy, an institution that is working policies of EDI. And it's really beautiful to see how they were enchanted that this university is worried. And it's an institutional worry. It's not just, we're not just talking about this. Our institution chose to have a board related to EDI and EDI department, and we chose to include this in the welcoming of our new servers. So these servers would arrive in an environment that was already transformed and would have a different point of view related to these topics. Just to notice, we launched a new program this year that widened the content about equity and diversity inside our program, so that we can receive these new servers also with this topic, this subject, because we think that it's really important that people arrive the institution knowing that UFC is an institution that is working gender equality, struggle against racism, and any type of discrimination or violence. Next slide, please. Then here you have a few reports of people that participated in our seminar. They were super satisfied and discussed these subjects.
Preferido foi o dia da equidade, né? Porque os dois primeiros dias eles receberam só informações.
The moment that I liked the most was the moment about equity. These 2 last days were exclusive for inclusion, and many people considered as the most important moment. Next slide, please.
E aí, mais depoimento.
And here we have more testimonies.
A
Someone talked about this welcoming and this inclusion. Next slide, please.
I
wanted to thank UFC is super proud of receiving this award. We're organizing a regional seminar with the prize that we won to discuss the role of women in research. So it's going to be a seminar that is going to bring these discussions in a regional scope in Ceará with all the higher education institutes that compose our state. And we're going to have UFC as a mentor and organizer of this event. Thank you, guys. Good morning. Thank you, Luzimar. Congratulations for all your presentations. Now we're going to start a part where we're going to receive international insights with two guests. We have Elisa and Gary. They're going to talk to us in English. And I'm going to invite the panelists to stay here on the table so that we can see these presentations. But if someone needs translation for these presentations, you can go get your devices outside the auditorium. If not, we're going to continue here towards our next presentation and invite Gary, that is based in London or in Singapore. I don't know exactly where he is, but he's a specialist in inclusion and education with more than 20 years of experience with leadership and implementation of practices of diversity in a global scope, especially turned to higher education, research, and international development. He's going to be with us in more than one moment today. So welcome, Gary. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I don't speak Portuguese, so I'm going to be speaking to slides in English, but I think my slides are in Portuguese, so this is a new experience for me. As mentioned, sorry, there's a very bad feedback. So, I'm a consultant working in the area. I'm really sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's very bad. Oh, no, it's okay now. I'm a consultant working in the area of inclusion and higher education, and I've done so for the last 20 years. I'm based in London and Singapore, as mentioned, and I'm currently in London. It's lovely to see some of you again. I met you all earlier at a previous seminar. And thank you to the British Council, CNPq, and People First for inviting me today. I was interested in hearing about all the great work that you've done so far with the Brazilian universities. So it was inspiring to see what you've done. I've been asked today to reflect on what I've learned in terms of working with universities in the UK about advancing gender equality in higher education. And to do that, I always think it's useful to have a framework of thinking. And one that I come back to often is Londa Schievinger's fixes. For those of you who don't know Professor Londa Schievinger, she is a professor at Stanford University and the founder of Gendered Innovations, which is an ongoing project focused on sex and gender analysis, methods in research and innovation. The website is well worth a visit if you have never been or done so before. Schievinger coined the term fixes about 20 years ago in 2005. It's how she classified what approaches universities take when addressing gender equality. So she has three fixes. Fix the numbers, which is on focusing on increasing women's participation and the number of women, for example, in senior position. Fixing the institution, so removing barriers and transforming structures that hinder gender equality. And fixing the knowledge, so incorporating gendered analysis into basic and applied research. And I'm sure many of you will recognize these approaches when you think about what you are doing at your own institution. And as I listened to the award winners so far, I was thinking through the different things that they said. And so there are examples of each. For fixing the numbers, there were outreach programs to girls to encourage them into science and mathematics, having quotas for women affected by domestic violence, for example. Fixing the institution, we talked about creating an ombudsman, having universal bathrooms, or enhancing maternity policies. Fixing the knowledge. So I know one university did whole community courses on sexism and gender with an active aim to try and encourage men to participate. So here you see that there are examples already from each of your institutions about where you are focusing on. And I think the reason this framework is important is because you know best what your context is. That context could be your particular university, like the age of your students, which I noted that I said earlier, or the importance of anti-racism and its intersection with gender. It could be where you are in Brazil, whether you are federal, public, private university. You, your staff, and your students are best placed to know what the issues are and to be intentional about the choices you are
Sabe melhor do que
making.
ninguém sobre o seu contexto e quais que são as escolhas que devem ser feitas do que vocês estão tentando mudar. Mas também precisam ser conscientes, tentando manter.
Can I have a little click on the slide, please? So yeah, so think about knowing your context and institution. And a word of caution, remember that fixing the numbers shouldn't be about fixing women. That somehow women are deficit and need fixing. So for example, if you are thinking about mentoring schemes, think about how they can be co-produced, or if, for example, reverse mentoring might be an option. If you're thinking about leadership development, how is it framed so that those going through the leadership development are bringing their knowledge and skills and not being told that they're missing certain things and being fixed. So just remember that is an important thing to think about. Can I have the next slide, please? And just like I could see examples of all the in various design awards, so too can I see them in the UK. I picked some examples here, but remember that these contexts are different. So draw from these ideas, but don't replicate without really thinking about how this fits your university or institution. So, in terms of fixing the numbers, we have, for example, the University of Sheffield, Mechanical Engineering, and they have had targeted recruitment, thinking about which saw an increase of female representation in research posts, and now with 4 out of 6 positions being filled by women. So they've kind of targeted about fixing numbers. The University of Bath, which I think is an interesting one, had a number of projects. The first was about reimagining recruitment to change the culture of academic recruitment. And that was focused very much on early career researchers. So how do we change the early entry points into research? And then they thought about mid-career researchers. So they funded mid-career women to participate in a national program called Aurora, which is a women's leadership program here for universities, to think about a different career stage within the university. And in terms of results, they have seen an increase in female professors at university going up from 16.4 to 22% between 2017 and 2021. So they have measurable ways of looking at the results as well. Can I have the next slide? No, that's the one. That's it. So I'm going back to the University of Sheffield and mechanical engineering, because this for me is a particularly interesting one. For many years, universities in the UK have said they don't have enough women studying engineering because not enough girls study A-level physics. And A-level is the equivalent of I tried to translate in this Portuguese, Certificado de Ensino Médio in Brazil. And what? Thank you. And so universities here say that it's not their fault. They can't do anything about it. It's the high schools that don't teach enough girls physics. However, when some universities, including the University of Sheffield, looked at their own curriculum, they realized that actually in the first year of an undergraduate engineering degree, they teach the same A-level physics again, because they wanted to make sure that every student had the same foundations in physics. And so, in order to encourage more women into physics, they removed the requirement from undergraduate requirement to have A-level physics. And so that removed a systemic barrier for women applicants into engineering. And they've seen an increase from 12% to 15% over a number of academic years because they have removed a systemic barrier. It's an interesting approach in terms of how we get more women into sciences as opposed to outreach, but actually changing a whole system. Then we have another example from the University of Glasgow School of Health and Wellbeing, where they have work-life initiatives such as email practices emphasizing there's no requirement to respond to things after work, having core hours to avoid early or lunch scheduling. And an interesting thing about this and the use of core hours, it is not just good in terms of gender equality. For example, parents who may drop their children off at school, but actually anybody in the faculty who wants a better work-life balance and to look after their own well-being. So some initiatives really about changing the system can change the way we think about the culture and the way we work at an institution. I can have the next slide, please. Now, fixing the knowledge. This is an area that is perhaps newer and less focused on, in the UK at least, on how do universities integrate sex and gender analysis into their research. Interesting, in the UK, the National Institute of Health and Care Research, so one of our funders, currently requires funding applications to consider how sex and gender will be applied throughout the life cycle of a research project. So this is interesting for us because it's a new requirement, and it's going to be interesting to see how many universities start to think about this a lot more. So some examples of what universities are doing in this space. So the Lancaster University Management School has developed its own guide on how to integrate gender awareness and inclusivity into research and innovation. Allows for practical steps for people to think about how to analyze and put a gender perspective into their research. The University of Edinburgh have a Gender Ed initiative, which is a toolkit for researchers in STEM, so that's science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine disciplines, to improve gender-sensitive approaches in their projects and research funding. So you see here that there are three ways of thinking about the fixes. But before I end, I would like to add a note of caution about sustained gender equality work. A couple of weeks ago, I attended a British Council event on gender equality in Southeast Asian universities. And one of the panelists there, Professor Rom Yen from Mae Fang Lon University in Thailand, said a number of things that really resonated with me, and I think are important lessons for us all. The first is a picture you will see of a Bunsen burner evaporating a liquid. And her first thing she said was, be careful of policy evaporation. What she meant by this is that a policy's intended outcome diminishes or disappears over time, failing to be maintained after initial implementation. This can happen when a policy is weakened by existing bureaucracy, a change in leadership, or where it conflicts with powerful internal structures like patriarchal structures, or when external funding comes to an end. Let's say project funding comes to an end. And in the world that we live in, for example, we have seen, I work in international development as well, how gender-oriented policies have all evaporated quite suddenly when Trump came to power. So in your context, think about the policies that you might be putting in place now. But what happens when a new policy you put in place, say on gender-based violence or inclusive language, evaporates over time? How will you sustain the work and avoid people saying something like, oh, it's not an issue, gender-based violence, because we have a policy. We have an ombudsman, so it can't be an issue anymore. So be careful of the policy evaporation. The second point, and this comes a lot to fixing the numbers, is what Professor Rom Yen called the parity illusion, and to be aware of that. Equal numbers of men and women in leadership positions do not does not equate to gender equality. The qualitative experience is so important, and the culture of the institution is important. So earlier we heard about what UFF said about there's never been a female rector. But even if there was to be one, would the institution's masculine structures go away? Or would people say, oh, we have a female rector, so now we have gender equality and it's no longer a problem? So be aware of the parity illusion where the numbers don't always tell the story. Can I have a final slide, please? My final thought is to leave you with this. As you develop your action plans and think about what you implement, you can probably see how your actions are aimed at one of Shibinga's 3 fixes. The challenge I have for you, and I would love to discuss more with you if we had more time, is how you would fix the culture. Can I have a click on the slide, please? What does it mean to you and your institution to bring all these things together to fix the culture, which is genuinely around gender equality? And how do you know that the culture has truly changed and been fixed? That's the point I leave you with for today, and I'll be around today to discuss a little bit further. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for all those pertinent insights. E agora a gente vai receber a nossa segunda facilitadora para
our second professor to talk about these international experiences. This is going to be with Elisa Lavore, and she works with innovation, social innovation, with over 15 years of experiences in the whole Latin America. So she's going to bring this regional look, and she also talked about specific forms of managing the institutions and also education data. So welcome, Elisa. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for that kind presentation, and thank you for staying with us to discuss a little bit about our experience in Mexico. I hope the insights I'm going to share with you today are useful to the amazing processes you're undertaking. Congratulations to all universities who presented today. You're doing a great work, and I hope this contributes to that endeavor you are leading right now. Today I'm going to present insights from technical assistance we delivered to 5 universities, public universities in Mexico. This was in the context of an international cooperation agreement of the UK government with the Mexican government. And we work with universities who work in 4 states in Mexico, and with the mission and the overall the goal of supporting them in improving their gender equality and social inclusion results. So to begin with, I would like to share with you some context of Mexico. We've seen a great progress in the country in the past decade in women's enrollment in higher education. Today, there are more women in higher education than men. However, this has not translated into better outcomes in the labor market. And also, we see structural barriers in the education systems that haven't been overcome. For instance, 6 out of 10 people age 15 and over without education are women in Mexico. Only 46% of women are in the labor market compared to 75% of men. And 30% of women who are working today are doing so in the informal sector. This relates to structural barriers such as gender-based violence, who's still prevailing in the labor market, discriminatory hiring practices, stereotypes that determine that women cannot get hired or cannot perform certain roles in the labor market, and restrictive social norms that determine that women should be taking care of children at home rather than having a full-time job. The next slide, please. Another major issue is the persistent gender gap in STEM professions. As you can see in the graph, we have a constant gap over time of women and men, although we have slightly more women enrolling in STEM careers, that's not enough. That's to close the gap. So the gap remains constant. So in this regard, the next slide, please. Skills for Prosperity, that was a cooperation of the UK government. It was a global initiative launched by the British government to foster equality and inclusion. Was implemented from 2020 to 2023 with a focus on Tibet education, with both at the upper secondary and the higher levels. And at the higher level, the program delivered technical assistance to a specific subsystem of universities, which are Tibet higher education universities. The picture you can see in the slide is one picture of a university in Chihuahua, that's a state in the north. And one characteristic of these universities is that they are located in rural communities where students and youth usually have difficulties in accessing education because they're in remote communities. And these are mostly vulnerable students. As you can see in the picture, these are indigenous students who otherwise would have gone to the university. So we decided to work with these universities given their strategic position to actually address gaps with students who are facing most barriers. And the focus of one of the pillars of the program, of the interventions, was strengthening work-based learning programs and using them to connect students with employers and providing the opportunity of gaining relevant experience. So these work-based learning programs were strategic to close many of the gaps we identified in our diagnostic. The next slide, please. So some of the work with these work-based learning programs, we had to focus and center our assistance to outreach departments who lead these programs in these universities model. So our diagnostic identified that there were many challenges in these departments. The first one was that there was a limited bandwidth of staff within the university. Just to give you an example, in one university, there were only 2 officers supporting 40,000 students. So this meant that the type of support and specialization they could give to each student was very limited. So we had to adapt our assistance to that major constraint. We also identified that they had weak employer linkages, and this often, given that they had a low leverage power to put conditions to employers to work with them, this meant that it was recurrent and frequent that they were reproducing gender stereotypes and just letting companies and employers determine how they would, in which conditions they would enroll students. And this meant very often that they would discriminate women. For instance, companies in the mining sector in one of these universities would not receive female students because they said that mining is not, they perceived that mining was not a sector for women, and the outreach departments were not taking action against that. They were just passively accepting and normalizing that dynamic. In many instances, these universities were just collecting minimal data to comply with reports required by the Ministry of Public Education at the federal level. They were not doing major disaggregation or analysis to understand better what's going on with their students, either in their careers or in the labor market. Although they were collecting data with employers and students, these were not used as feedback loops that would help them improve the whole experience and the programs and identify potential differentiated gaps determined by gender or other personal characteristics. So without data, just as Gary was pointing, we need to fix our numbers. So if we don't have the data and we're not doing the analysis, gaps remain invisible. And that was clear in the context of these universities we were working with. The next slide, please. So we started the following journey to support these universities to improve gender equality mainstreaming throughout work-based learning programs. So the first step in this process was integrating, generating relevant data and generating the relevant analysis to address GESI gaps. This is going to be the focus of my presentation today, so I'm just going to give you a general overview of the whole process and the steps we integrated in this process. After that, we delivered a train the trainer series of workshops to help the outreach department deliver employability skills development workshops with students. So they would address gender stereotypes in the labor market, help them navigate discriminatory hiring practices during interviews, also how to prepare a CV without gender biases and that could prevent them to getting called back for an interview. We also deliver a toolkit for employer engagement with a GESI lens, so they could address discriminatory perceptions such as the one I was describing in the mining sector and other sectors in the manufacturing sector. In northern Mexico, mining and manufacturing are two of the most important economic sectors, and these are highly male-dominated economic sectors. So universities need to be proactive in working with employers to address this discriminatory culture that is still prevailing in the labor market. And then we work with them to help them improve work-based learning programs with a GESI lens, and provide them with handbooks they could deliver to employers, and they could also use themselves to take in mind some important practices to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to learn during their experience in a company. So the next slide, please. So regarding data analysis, the focus and the purpose of this part of the assistance was developing gender-sensitive indicators on the internships and employability. Also, we trained outreach staff who was responsible of collecting this data on how to analyze the data and interpret it with GESI lens. We also help them think of the way they could create this continuous feedback between students, employers, and the institution itself, and using data just on how to use data to inform institutional decision-making and advocacy for safer and more inclusive workplaces, work-based learning programs. The next slide, please. So I want to share with you some of the insights we had from the systems we delivered to one specific university, the Technological University of Chihuahua. This university is located in a city in Chihuahua, and we decided to work with it because at the time they had a woman rector who was very engaged and committed with integrating a GESI lens in all the university and all the areas of the university. So there was a strong leadership committed at the time to improve and address many of the gender gaps that she knew were there, but they were not actually being addressed. So the purpose when we started working with the outreach department within the university was developing gender-sensitive indicators and interpreting data with a GESI lens and ensuring that data was used in other areas within the university so that they would it would inform decision-making towards a more inclusive environment. However, we faced three major concerns. Here are two of them pointed. The first one was a regulatory constraint because this subsystem of universities is highly centralized. So they have to be aligned with the monitoring and evaluation framework from the federal government. So given that collecting data and analyzing data takes time and effort, and as I mentioned, there was a limited bandwidth at the outreach department, but the work they were doing was just minimal compliance with what the federal government was requiring. So here's an example on a slide of the type of reports they were producing. And as you can see, it is not possible with that type of reporting to understand what's happening with students, whether there are gender gaps, whether all students are doing okay, or if we're having differences in how they perform in the labor market and in other areas. So this is just a minor example of how reporting took place at the time, because this is what the Ministry of Education in Mexico is requiring. There were also cultural constraints regarding how normalized discrimination has become, because when you're embedded just in a discriminatory culture and you see things such as the example I mentioned in the mining sectors every day, at some point, well, you start thinking that, well, that's just the way it works and there's no way of doing it differently. And we cannot think of they just didn't see that was something that they need to address, and whether they could not change the way companies were determining who was going to go to a program with them. They could think of alternatives for students so they would not stay in a discriminatory environment. And the third constraint had to do with staff's self-perception of their own capacity to perform more detailed analysis with the data they were collecting. We did a survey with them, and at the university, about 83% of those who were involved in the data collection process mentioned that they did not feel comfortable with statistics overall. So with this in mind, we had to think of a strategy to address these constraints and ensuring that staff felt comfortable doing new type of analysis with data, and started collecting other type of data as well. Next slide, please. So we designed two-day workshop to address these challenges, and these were designed in an accessible format to explain basic concepts in evaluation and statistics, so they would not feel overwhelmed, and they would just feel comfortable with all the information delivered. And we didn't present anything complex that would imply that they would not use it. To address cultural biases that I was just describing, we delivered separate workshops to sensitize them on gender-based violence and discrimination, and to start questioning them on some of the dynamics that they were just normalizing. This was with a behavioral lens, and we did some practical work with them in these workshops. And after that, we used their own data, and we asked them to use their own data to reflect on further on discrimination, gender-based violence, and gender gaps within the university. So this was completely rooted in their own context. Overall, well, we mapped existing data systems. They had a platform, Proyecta, to see what type of information they were generating. We reflected with them, and we questioned them on the internal purposes of evaluating beyond compliance with the federal government, and asked whether they needed more internal indicators, even if they were not going to report them to the federal government because they were not required at that level. As I mentioned, we trained on running analysis with disaggregated data, and supported the process of identifying where were necessary additional analysis and those that they were already running. We also discussed a little bit about visualization, because dissemination of data is necessary it is just not a question of generating the analysis, but we need to make sure that all the areas within the university use the data and informs decision-making, not only in one specific area, but in all the
Só
departments
em uma
within
área
the university.
específica, mas em todos os departamentos.
And we also help them think of how to integrate better feedback loops between students, employers, and the university. So with this process, we help them move from basic data collection to the use of evidence to improve equality. The next slide, please. So through these efforts, just to give you a few insights on what we learned through the process, the outreach department identified gaps that they were just not aware of. I think the major one was the income gap that their graduates were actually facing. They found out that nearly 50% of male graduates earn over 15,000 pesos, compared to only 28% of women. So there was an income gap that they just didn't know was going on after graduation for the students. They also found out that there was an occupational gender-based segregation. So although 70% of all the graduates were getting a job and were getting employed, which is good, they were not getting hired in the same type of positions. Women tended to move to other careers when they were following a career that is typically associated to male sectors, or if they were hired in a company that worked in the sector where they studied, they were not actually in a position that implied using their skill set. They were in human resources, or they were in administrative positions that didn't require them going to the field. So overall, this process helped in increasing awareness about gender bias that they didn't know was there, and particularly in labor market outcomes. And the commitment from the leadership strengthened inclusive policies and communication. We improved the commitment of the rector to improve inclusive policies and communication with employers. So just to give you some lessons learned, just to finalize my presentation, strengthening data systems and analytical capacities in higher education can help improve, make visible gender gaps and inform evidence-based decisions. However, we need to take into account some things to ensure that these are sustainable in time and that these actually happen. Changing the way we collect data and we analyze data and use data entails effort and time that sometimes staff just doesn't have. So we need a champion who is highly committed there, and for that we need to sensitize relevant stakeholders within the university. This is just not a one-person job. We need to have a team who's committed with this purpose. So the first step is showing everyone the need to have this disaggregation, this data disaggregation. Then we need to make sure that dissemination happens and that all the areas within the university use the information generated to inform decision-making. Otherwise, all these efforts would not materialize in cultural change, as we were discussing with Gary in the previous presentation. And finally, just to share that all the process and all the amazing work we managed to do with the Technological University of Chihuahua just vanished. As we were discussing with Gary, these changes can just evaporate over time. In this particular case, they didn't evaporate, they just were erased because technical universities suffer from political cycles, and there's significant staff rotation with every government change. So when staff left, all the work we did was lost. It was not institutionalized because, as I mentioned, this was additional work that was done beyond the monitoring and evaluation framework from the federal government. So changes in monitoring and evaluation systems must be institutional, not project-based or dependent on one specific individual. Staff turnover can erode good practices unless they are integrated into an institutional framework. So these were the lessons I wanted to share with you and insights. I hope you find them useful, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisa, for such a rich presentation and all the insights. So now, before we break for a brief pause, antes da gente encerrar essa sessão para uma pausa curtinha, a gente vai abrir para uma sessão de perguntas e respostas.
We're going to start a session of Q&A. It can be for whatever representatives of our universities that were awarded, or whatever panelists that are participating online. Does anyone have any type of question? We have a question from Lisandra from CNPq. My question is a little bit difficult. I think it's going to be a little bit complicated, but we know that for the entry in higher education and the entry of women in the market of research and development, we always evaluate the merit. It can be through the national exam, or it can be through projects, but through the numbers, we know that we are the majority of society. We're the majority in scientific initiatives. We're majority in graduations. But when this number is reflected in the staff of universities, there's a majority of men. Nothing against men, but what can we do, and what are the actions that you think about this? If during these processes for hiring staff and for other activities that the university promotes, maybe we don't need specific quotas for women, but we know that the path that is to be taken by women is going to be much more difficult for them to reach positions of leadership. It can be for administration positions or the development of their own careers. So what do you, from your own experience, can share with us? And also CNPq, how can you support this?
Eddie, maybe we can open for one more question and then...
Yes, I think, so any more questions here from the audience, also from our participants online? Yeah. If you have any questions, please reach out to the hosts through the chat so that those can come through as well. Perhaps from the audience, any questions here? Okay, Lucy, any questions coming in? Ramon, any questions coming in through the chat?
Thanks, Eddie. No, nothing here so far. We are having difficulty, however, hearing people asking questions on the ground. If you could use the microphones or repeat the question, that would be amazing so we can hear.
Yes, we had one question from Lisandra from CNPq. Did you hear that loud and clear?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the one we have so far. So I don't know which of our experts or our awardee institutions would like to respond.
Would you like to start?
It was a big question, so perhaps it was a good question, so perhaps several of you would want to join in the conversation.
Pode ser. Obrigada pela pergunta, Lisandra. Bem desafiadora.
Yes, thank you for your question, Lisandra. It was really challenging, actually. And I think in our case of the University of Ceará, we're towards this path. Our university shows that there is an institutional worry related to gender. I didn't talk about this in my speech because I didn't have enough time, but we just approved our policy of struggling against violence, and and harassment. So I think that the institutional role of a university, it's really important in this issue that is related to the women's role inside the institution. So just like I said, when you get in an institution, in a picture gallery, in a technology center, and you can just find one picture with a woman that is a director recently, this brings a reflection, and it bothers us a little bit also. It bothers girls that study in those centers, the researchers that are in the project, and for everybody that is participating, the administrative assistants, everybody asks, where are the women as leaders here? So the fact that we're discussing here all these subjects related to gender, it's already this already shows that we need to promote changes. And I really believe in a change that comes from the institution. So from the moment that the institution positions itself, it also promotes a cultural change that I believe this is the most difficult one, that is going to impact society. So this is stimulation for girls to get into exact science. It's already a sign that we want to promote this change, because usually women are fostered to other roles socially. So we have many actions toward this in our technology center. We celebrate the Day of Girl in Engineering. So, of course, we always want to include men. They are an important part of this discussion, but we need to discuss the importance of women inside engineering. So I believe it's that. Paula, would you like to add something? I think it's a complex question. It's hard to answer, but I think that in a general way, data in UFI are according to our context. So I think that we need to look towards this with a really calm point of view, because we don't have a specific formula. We have many different paths that are possible. So if you're talking about a specific contest, I don't know if I think it's a complicated situation, but we need to think how we can build this, how we can. When I'm talking about the fact that we don't have a woman as a dean, we're not saying that it's just enough to be a woman, but maybe put someone that is capable to feel and have a different view for that institution, that uses a different lens, and thinking about a lens that is feminist and intersectional, so that we can think in policies and actions that reverb, so that we can build a community that is more equal. I brought here to the discussion something that is more institutional and really particular, related to this program that I'm participating as a psychologist. we had we tried to create credentials for professors where we had issues related to mothers getting in the program, and we're trying to think factors so that we can correct these situations, but it's not simple. So at the same time that we go in a certain way, it's interesting to think that everything every force has a counter force. So
há bem pouco tempo e que a gente conseguiu barrar,
we were in a scenario a few moments ago that we were able to finish the talk that everything was based on merit.
Então como é que a gente faz para entrar mais mulheres, né, mais docentes, mas também como elas permanecem, como elas progridem, né?
So when we're talking about women and
nível de acúmulo, porque a discussão, por exemplo, das ações afirmativas que não basta.
Because, for example, it's a discussion about affirmative things, that it's not only about creating maintenance for a solution, but I think it's a really difficult answer.
Enfim, acho que basicamente falei da resposta, que acho que não tem resposta. Foi complexa a pergunta.
I think that I talked a lot, but I didn't answer your question because it was a really complex question. But for us to discuss policies of equity, we need to put on the table an important issue. We can't stay just as an outsider. Just for us to be able to nominate and nominate and talk about these policies, we already show that we're paying attention, and that this needs to be thought in other ways.
Pergunta bem difícil, não só por promover o prêmio, mas acho que é uma pergunta bem cabível. Exemplo do CNPq.
So it was such a hard question, and specifically regarding this motherhood issue. So we tried to help these mothers regarding their projects that the universities promote. So we try to help them with specific programs. So both the staff of the university and the researchers, they have some extra time that counts on their lattice curriculum that that is connected to the time that they were there raising their kids, and then they stopped a little bit their productions, but they were still in the research field. So there is something I've never thought about before. We try to think a little bit about as a research project for new professors at the university. And I believe that it goes together with how can we use the value of the award in our institution. The university has added more money for scientific projects that nowadays the servers, the mothers, and the researchers, they're going to have a girl that is going to assist them. So spoiler, this is going to be launched just next week. Now you know about it. So the team is building all of this project, and independently of their age, you have an extra point. And the kids, they have like different criteria from 0 to 5 years old. These mothers are going to have more points since they require more care. So we don't know the results of it because everything is so new, but at least it's a good way because we have a place to think about these things, to think about what is possible to be done in the future. Thank you.
My friend and colleague, Jane Rexworthy, she's joining us online. She would also like to respond to Lisandra's question.
Hello, everyone, and I'm delighted to be here, hoping you can hear me. I want to take a slightly different approach to this. I want to suggest that we should be considering what we do as women to empower ourselves
A respeito de nos empoderar. Como que a gente consegue se posicionar?
And certainly it's something that I've used in my career. And I know we're delighted. Diana's online today, who's managed to reach that high position of dean, to mentor and provide support for women that are growing their careers and to provide the type of confidence building, training and development that will help women to position themselves in the roles that they have. So I just want to take a slightly different angle to it, to get us to think about how we help ourselves in this position. And it's so wonderful to see so many women joining the call, with men, of course, but so many women joining the call today. And I think there's a real opportunity in the future to support through mentoring, ambassadorship, to help our amazing women to achieve their full potential. So I'm going to stop there with that thought.
Thank you, Jane. And we have one final question online from Yana. Go ahead, Yana. The floor is yours. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Sim, está correto. Bom dia, pessoal. Aqui é Yana.
Good morning, everyone. This is Yana. I am the founder of Programaria, which is an initiative inside the universities. And we've been acting in order to provide young women with tools to become more present in the market. And my question is about how can we guarantee the advances, considering the context that we are inserted in, and all
dos avanços que a gente teve, pouco das contraforças,
and the advances that we have lived so far regarding diversity, especially in the corporative world. So I would like to hear a little bit about you, from you actually, and well, regarding this phenomenon of evaporation and other policies, and these things are really tough to solve. So it's really difficult to see, and we would like to have an environment that culture is finally something that accepts other people. So how about this process of advances and this punctual impacts inside the institutions? And what do you identify as fundamental in order to solve this question? Thank you so much. Thank you. I think I will have another round with the representatives around here regarding what Jane brought. So let's do the opposite. Maybe Lauren can start. Do you have any comments?
No? Sim, só ecoar da pertinência dos temas, né?
Maybe just how pertinent the topics are. Do you have any further comments? I think I am going to put in a sense of my name being brought here. Well, what we have experienced so far in our country There was a time that we couldn't speak, and now we can. And now there is this movement of attacks. Everything is so violent. Regarding specific fights, let's put it like this. And I believe that we need to be aware because there are impacts on what we say. And well, there is like quite a time that we have started to see some professors, male and female, who are afraid of speaking up inside their classrooms and afraid of teaching what they do. For example, I have heard from some people saying, no, I think it's better that maybe we can ease a little bit our speech because they were afraid of a retaliation that was not actually institutional, but as something that would gain social dimensions in the past times that we lived. So I believe that we need to think that, well, luckily a few things have changed, but not all of them. So we are in the middle of this battlefield, and there are things that are important and violent. And Gary stated, and then our colleague from Mexico, Elisa, both of them brought very important things, which is this possibility of evaporation. And I also believe that when we don't consolidate something that is resistant, we are in risk. And of course, I'm speaking from a very comfortable space because I've been working with the policies regarding women, and out of nothing, with just a signature, my project has suffered issues. So it's really difficult to make it something sustainable because it changes according to the political scenario of each country. But at the same time, we also are in risk of being erased, as Elisa said. I believe that there are two movements that are not exactly the same, but because as we can see, they remark something different. And in Brazil here, during these last years, we were silenced regarding specific topics. So I think that nowadays we're trying to change this scenario, and it's very good to be here and trying to remark the things that we did before and were silenced, but also recognizing that we need to move forward. They were not enough. So it's good to have a team of women here to try to deal with this scenario of, well, the things that we have and the things that we want to have. Thank you, Paula. Lucima, just complimenting your speech. Well, during my speech, I mentioned the diversity of inclusion, and it's important that it's inside the organogram of the institution. It needs to be something formal. This thing was created recently. It has only 2 years that it has existed, and there is a possibility that in every 4 years, the leadership is going to change. So there is the possibility that the next leadership does not see the necessity of this existing tool. And of course, there are the cons regarding this decision. When a decision like this is taken, it's something similar to a signal of which people are ruling that place. So it's a social indicator regarding this decision. And this is what I want to bring regarding what was said previously. So as I mentioned before, it is a institutional sign. People are somehow marking their own territories politically. And at the time that we institutionalize these things, it gets harder to be undone. Thank you, Lucima. Lauren? So I just like to complement what Lucima said and all of the women here. I believe that we are all in risk every 4 years in every single sphere. And I think that it's important to make a philosophical and political distinction, because we have lots of policies of government, but a few regarding the state, regarding the gender issue. So I believe that this is something that I've been repeating a lot, the centrality of the topic, because many times we work with these affirmative policies, we can have the voice of saying we are not just in peripheral areas, we are looking for institutionalization of these topics, because we are thinking about these topics aiming to a state policy. So I think that the things that we live in, this is a social construction, culture one too, but we do need the access of these devices that can avoid the evaporation of what we've been doing. So how can we do this? Well, there's no simple solution for a complex problem. So we need to follow stages. It is pretty slow, and we need to build this step by step. So I believe that this is a space, a very important one, of construction. Thank you, Lauren. So,
lady, one of our online participants, that I thought was very interesting. She says the change of people in the administration also affects our policies within the universities, as mentioned in the presentation. It's painful to see a path you invested in being dismantled, and sometimes even being dismantled by women themselves. So I thought that was very pertinent to the discussion and very interesting to share. Thank you so much, milady. And then just finally, our UK expert, Gary Loke, would like to answer both Lisandra and Jana's question online as well. Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you for those interesting questions. I don't think I have an answer, but I have some thoughts, and because I think an answer is almost impossible. The first question was about merit and getting women into positions, and it comes back to me the thought about systems and how do we try and fix a system. And we've had this debate in the UK as well. What is merit? What is excellence? What is research excellence? And it's very gendered. Everything is very gendered here. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Matthew effect. The Matthew effect, or in gender terms, we call it the Martha effect, really, where those who have initial advantage accumulate that advantage over time. So if you have a good publication record and a grant record, you are more likely to get another publication, another grant, and then you build and build and build and build. And suddenly when it comes to promotion, you are the person to be promoted because you've brought in the most money. And I think the complex answer to this question is, how do we start to deconstruct merit and deconstruct recruitment and promotion? It's not easy, and I'm not saying this is an easy thing, because we rely very heavily in the academic world on narrative CVs. We see what we have published, we see where we've got our grants, and narrative CVs do not favor women who have career breaks. It doesn't favor non-linear and non-traditional careers, what I call a braided career, where you braid things in and out. And so my first thought is, how do you powers and spheres challenge that system and change the system into something that takes a much more structured approach to recruitment and promotion, to think about the future rather than the past. So just because someone has published well doesn't mean that they're going to be a good dean, they're going to be a good rector. What are the actual skills you need in those areas, and how do we change the recruitment so it's not a narrative approach, by getting people to demonstrate the skills they need in their job. And very often in the academic sector, we also undervalue teaching. Research is really important, and we undervalue the relationship that people have with students. And I think actually we should be much more future focused on that. It's not easy, but I think it's doable. And there are some really interesting studies, experimental studies on using AI to look at narrative CVs to see how biased they are and whether there are ways we can change the way that narrative CVs work. So that's the question of merit. And then I was thinking about what Jane said about actually how women should mentor women. Well, I think everybody should mentor each other, and we should learn from each other. But it's also then thinking about, what can we do to prevent policy evaporation? And I think there's a big piece there about knowing where you are in your sphere of influence. I say this because I sometimes work with early career researchers, and they say to me, well, we have no influence. We can't change anything. I'm just an early career researcher. But actually, I think you can. I think everybody should know where their spheres of influence are and who they can influence. So, for example, I say to early career researchers, you may think you have no influence, but you work with other people in your lab. What is your interaction around them? One of the challenges they always say is, oh, there are no men at these events. I haven't counted how many men there are at these events. But actually, within your sphere of influence, who is a man that you might bring along to one of these, whose views you might be able to change, for example? So what is that sphere of influence? And I say that about myself as well. If I were to go to a rector of a university tomorrow and say, I don't think you're doing very well in gender equality, I think you should do all these things, why would they listen to me? They have no idea who I am. They know I work in this field, and they're not interested. But actually, I know other rectors who are very interested in it. And if I go and work with another rector and say, actually, I think we could work together to help influence other rectors. Rectors listen to other rectors. They don't listen to me. I know who their spheres of influence are. So knowing who you can use around you is really important. And the other thing I would say is concentrate your efforts to make sure that there is no policy evaporation. So I always say when I work with institutions that I would say there are 20% that I'm going to work with who are allies, who are generally very committed to gender or race equality. There is a middle bit, I'm going to call the 60%, who are, well, it's interesting, but I don't have time, or I'm interested in it, but I don't know much about it. And there are 20% that will probably never change. And I would say to you, leave the 20% that will never change behind. I know that's a hard thing to do, but they're the hardest people to convince. Work on your 60% who you might be able to shift attitudes. Because if you focus on the ones who go, oh, they're a real blocker, they will never change, and you keep focusing your efforts on that, you will feel tired and exhausted. And this work is exhausting. So think about your spheres of influence and who you can change. And if you can bring the 60% along with you gradually, that's in a way how you might prevent some evaporation. If you only work on the top 20% and the top 20% are very committed, but half of them leave, then things evaporate. If you can work on the 60% and half of them come with you, that's 30% that comes with you, and they're all committed to gender equality, evaporation is less likely to happen. Having said that, we do know that the political winds change often, so it is a challenge. I said to you earlier, in my own world in international development, the changes of governments have meant that actually gender equality is suddenly no longer as important. But we are thinking about ways, and I work with international development agencies and universities to think about well-being in general rather than gender equality. We've changed the language, but we're doing the same thing. So there are creative round ways of kind of looking at policy evaporation.
Thank you very much, Gary. Eu acho que estamos prontos, então, agora para encerrar essa sessão de perguntas e respostas. Muito obrigada a todos pela participação. A gente vai fazer uma pausa de 5 minutos.
Thank you for your participation. We're going to do a pause of 5 minutes, and then when we come back, we're going to restart with a video that is going to be projected in the screen. Thank you, guys.
Jake is going to rep your accounts while you're on leave, so he'll just continue to handle your travel until you can do it.
But why? I don't understand. Wait, I'll be ready to travel and handle all of my as I'm back.
You say that now. Trust me. New baby's whole hot. Sleepless nights. You'll be glad for the. I thought more of the conversation with Al, and I wondered where did Maya come from? I realized my wife went back weeks. First baby. She had a rough few months. Said we're home. I was just understanding Dal's transition back, but. Her performance was good. Monetization. When I switched it up, thought about what I'd say. Father, that really made me. Jake is going to rep.
Bom, pessoal.
Welcome back. We're going to restart our schedule. We predicted to watch a small video now, but we had a technical issue, so we're going to leave the video to the end. And now we're going to receive our guest Gary for his second presentation today.
Thank you very much. Don't worry, I'm not going to be speaking too much. I've spoken at length, so now I'm going to just introduce an activity for you, and hope you all get into small groups to do this activity. So in this session, we will be working in small groups to explore how you are implementing gender equality at your institution. But before we do that, I would like to give you a little bit of thought and input into this session. Can I have the next slide, please? Can I have the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So a key output from the British Council in Brazil on gender equality was a co-produced gender equality framework. This was co-produced with Brazilian stakeholders, and it's based on the Athena Swan Charter, which is a UK gender equality charter for universities that has been running since 2005. The charter has been used as a reference point for various countries around the world who have developed their own programs in Ireland, Australia, the United States, Canada, Cyprus, and in India. And each country has important contextual differences, but a similar framework. Next slide, please. And in that common framework, which they all have, at the heart of it, each country has a set of core principles. For the Brazilian gender equality framework, there are 10 principles. There are also 5 areas that institutions need to work on. The first is around getting their leaderships to commit to gender equality, how to make that clear, how to make it visible, but also how to make it authentic, that there is an authentic commitment to gender equality. The second is around data, how to collect both qualitative and quantitative data to understand the issues that your institution faces. The third is how to use that data and to diagnose that data about what the issues are, what does it tell you? So it's not just to collect it, but actually think about how you are using it. The fourth area is around engaging with staff and students, and this can be around the data collection. It can be to test assumptions once you have evaluated and used your data. It can be to communicate about what's going on. It can be about how you're evaluating what you're doing at your institution. And the fifth area is to develop an action plan and to implement actions from it. Can I have the next slide, please? So the question for you today, and it's a chance now for you to discuss amongst yourselves, is where are you on your journey to gender equality? On this slide, you'll see some prompts that might help. Are you gathering data? Are you running specific development opportunities? Are you thinking about where you're going to get resources from? What are the initiatives that you are doing? And I would say that remember that the path in this journey takes time. So think about what is a priority for you now and why it's a priority. And also importantly, how are you keeping track of success? How do you know that what you're doing is working? And how will you know that it will work in future? So in small groups, we would like you to explore the practical ways that you are implementing gender equality within your institution. If you are in the room in Brasilia, please work in small groups of 2 or 3 with the people around you. If you are joining us online, you will be randomly assigned a breakout room. So thank you very much and enjoy your discussions amongst yourself. Hello. Is anybody here in
Pessoal, só queria avisar rapidinho que a gente vai dedicar mais 5 minutos a essas discussões, que estão super interessantes. Depois a gente vai fazer uma parte de sumarizar e emendar com outros exercícios na parte da tarde. Mas então, 5 minutinhos mais, e aí a gente vai ouvir as falas do British Council e do CNPq, e depois pausar para o almoço, tá bom? Pessoal, obrigada. Muito bom ver as trocas. Obrigada pela participação nessa discussão, por compartilharem. A gente vai suspender o exercício agora, mas no espírito de que continuaremos essas trocas na parte da tarde. E a gente vai ouvir o Gary só para uns comentários finais aqui após esse exercício, antes de ouvir a Vera e o Cassiano para as falas do British Council e do CNPq, as falas finais da manhã, tá bom, Gary? Are you here? You have the floor.
I am, but I didn't understand what you said because there was no translation.
Sorry, I was just saying that thanks for participating in the exercise and that you would just deliver a quick wrap up before we move to Vera's presentation for the British Council.
Great, thank you.
Gary, if you can just bear with us 1 second, the translation has just dropped out, so we're just re-adding it.
Okay.
And Gary?
Just bear with us 1 second, we're just reactivating the translation.
Por favor, fique com a gente.
That we discussed a little, and we are continuing the exercise in the afternoon, so with the working groups and everything.
Apologies, Gary, bear with us.
Right, that clicked back in, I think, Lucy.
It has indeed. Thank you.
Right, so we should have interpretation back again.
Yeah.
Right, thank you so much. Apologies for the slight delay. We obviously didn't have the interpreters for a few minutes. I hope you all had a chance to discuss amongst yourselves the various things you're doing in your institutions. We were going to have a feedback session, but we are a little bit behind time, so we're going to...
Mas nós estamos um pouco atrasados no tempo, então vamos ter uma sessão na parte da
afternoon session, then we will continue discussing. But I'm not going to keep us for any further. So I think we're going to move on to the next presentation, which is from the British Council. Lucy, do we have slides for the next presentation?
We do indeed.
And yes, and so I'm going to hand over to the British Council to speak at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Oh, can you guys hear me? I think now it worked.
Yes.
Muito obrigada. Eu vou tentar ser breve, que eu entendo que eu estou entre todo mundo e a hora do almoço, que é sempre uma posição muito delicada para se estar. Mas eu queria falar um pouquinho também sobre o que o British Council tem feito, né? E por que a gente tem feito isso. Então, indo para o próximo slide, por favor. E falando um pouquinho sobre o British Council, né? O British Council, a gente tem esse trabalho.
British Council has this work that is related to art, English, and we're in Brazil for 70 years now.
Pouquinho a mais, pouquinho a menos. E a gente tem trabalho muito forte no Brasil já tem tempo.
And we're doing a job here in Brazil related to higher education and doing partnerships with universities that want to partner up with us. And when we're looking how we could bring in impact here in Brazil, we started to think about women's in science. So we did a few studies around 2017 and 18, and we identified a few key areas that we need to work on. So we considered what we call the linking pipeline. Next slide, please. And here we can find 3 pillars where we can work on. Next slide, please. And then first we have the initial issue that was mentioned here about inspiration when we're looking towards girls that are thinking about their careers. We have many researchers that study that in this period, kids are started to put into boxes what are things for girls and things for boys. So we inserted this gender component in many jobs many works that we do in training teachers in many areas, especially when we're talking about computational thinking and coding. The second thing is about,
também espelhando o Prêmio Mulheres e Ciência.
and this mirrors a little bit the Women's Award. And here we have women that are starting their career and start to face different challenges, like networking, or sometimes they don't have a mentor, or need a certain adjustment or some type of support to understand what they're facing. Many times these women have individual problems, and they need to understand that this is a systemic issue. Also, we want to give visibility for women that are leaders and spread these figures so that we can have this view towards women in science and understand that women should be there and they are there. And eventually, this was a reference, a milestone for us. So next slide, please. And we can see here how this was reflected in a few works that we did. Next slide, please. Here we have an example of a few programs that we implemented. Our biggest project was in Brazil, but we also implemented in Mexico and Peru. We're countries that share many challenges and also opportunities, and we try to analyze different possibilities. And in Brazil, we started this work creating a milestone for gender equality. And we started to think, how can we spread these women that are incredible and also maximize initiatives and issues that they already had and things that can be institutionalized and spread in a better way in our country. And here we have our reference board. Next slide, please. I'm going to try to go a little bit faster. Here you have an example of a little bit what we did related to performance. We have a lot of material and content here. Next slide, please. And we want to spread this awareness. And we started in 2018, and we tried to say that even when we think that the data is good, we need to take care, because sometimes we have a false positivity. I had a speech last week that talked about this. We had beautiful data in Thailand, and things look really good there. We had 67% of women leading universities, but when you bring this to reality, it's a little bit different and not so positive. So next slide, please. Just for a last example. This was done in a magazine, talked a little bit about the profile of women that had a role of leadership. And in the next slide, we start talking about the reference framework. So this reference framework didn't come from nothing. We already looked towards the United Kingdom, that they have this model. but we understood that we just couldn't just bring this to our reality in a different context. So we financed projects from one side, and from the other side, we created training programs and also tried to create an advisory to advise these issues here in Brazil. And so it's not for the British Council to look towards institutions and say, this is what you need to do. We need to understand the problems, and from there we develop an action plan. So it's a tool for assessment and also for us to consolidate how this can work in a short, medium, and long term. Next slide, please. So we have here our principles, like, for example, self-assessment. We have also communication plans that bring society together to us. How do we bring leaderships to support this type of initiatives? Of course, we know that we have variations according to leaderships. We have a few ideas that evaporate. So a lot of this reference framework is about creating structures that can survive these changes. And for this, having the support of society is really important. We have this issue about self-assessment. It's about creating objectives and overcoming these objectives and these goals. We have many factors, like, for example, data collection. You can't do an assessment about an institution if you don't have the correct data. So we need to understand how things are configured. And this involves many cases, like, for example, the promotion of teachers, scholarships, and many other factors. Next slide, please. So when we did this work here in Brazil, we developed this reference framework, and we did workshops in 5 regions of our country. We financed 15 projects between universities, British universities and Brazilian universities, and we went through a training process and consultation process. We had a first version that wasn't so adequate to the context in Brazil, so it was really questioned, and we had a second and third version until we reached the ideal version. We also had many workshops, and how you can see, in this project we had many women leaders, so we tried to bring a few men that were leaders also. But this brought a few different results, but it also varied a lot. Next slide, please. So as we finish this process of different projects, we tried to create an assessment about our program of Women in Science to understand what worked and what we should do. This assessment was done since 2022 to 2023. And what we saw is that the design of this program was really well succeeded, because we identified that we had teams in Brazil, Mexico, and Peru that had the possibility of developing this whole content. This active listening of our partners was really important also, and the possibility of having the engagement and the value of training. This was something really positive. We also had a really wide approach. So having these 3 dimensions and trying to approach each one of these issues in each country was something really useful. Next slide, please. In the implementation, we saw a few challenges. The first one that we identified was the issue that many times we started something, but we didn't address all these issues since the beginning. So a failure that we had about implementation was about intersectionalism. It was something that we addressed during the program, and the advantage of having 5 years is that we can do these type of adjustments. And we wanted to understand how we could engage our audience and have the support that was necessary. We discovered this during the implementation. And the biggest challenge is about financing and sustainability, okay? I think this doesn't surprise anyone. Next slide, please. So we did this assessment and we saw that the impact of our program was really good. We had a really positive feedback related to all mentoring programs that we did with women. In Mexico, I saw this in data related to entrepreneurship. We had positive data. In Brazil, we had a really positive feedback related to universities and the support of the British Council and how this helped the agenda. Next slide, please. And we had this data that more than 37% of the institutions recognized the support that was given, and they agreed that this helped the capacity of women developing programs, not only looking towards the reference framework, but also the projects that we did related to innovation and training. Next slide, please. We had this positive assessment related to the adoption of practices of teaching and mentoring. So especially Brazil and Mexico adopted this design, and we had a really positive evaluation of the training that was delivered. Next slide, please. So what went well? We had really good results, but we had a few limitations. We had really good dialogues and partnerships, but we had what comes after this. Next slide, please. The lessons that were learned. One more, please. And then we get into the issue of the main conclusions. And what can we understand from this? We're trying to maintain the commitment and the partnership with CNPq. The initiative of women in science with CNPq and the Ministry of Women has been really positive because we're seeing that we need more financial incentives, and women that are doing a good job need to be recognized. This has many results, like for example, continue showing this as an example, but also promote help that can increase the potential in institutions. A good practice is for a university to see that another university is also changing their practices. So, next slide, please. How to guarantee this? The sustainability in institutions. We see the role of CNPq, we see the role of leaderships to create a consensus about what needs to be changed. We know that we have other issues when we're talking about the career progression. And we know that we had other issues that are more complex. So we need to take this as an agenda. One more slide, please. And also integrate the program in these practices. Something else that we said is how can we get something core and make this be part of the framework of our university? So we need to have human resources and also financial resources allocated. One more slide, please. We mentioned this as part of the political agenda. For us from the British Council, it's a lot about working together with the government and higher education institutes to give support and give different tools so that we can continue with the dissemination of this content. One more slide, please. The recommendations include, like I said, financing. We have a partnership with CNPq for the notice Women in Science, and we have this notice each 2 years. We had 2 proposals for the United Kingdom, and I think that next year we're going to have it once more. So we're going to have this notice to continue these next years, also for us to add a little bit to the job that we already do in Brazil. One more slide, please. I believe it's that. Thank you so much. I tried to be brief. I'm sorry. But yes, thank you once more.
Obrigada, Vera. Cassiano, por favor.
Thank you, Vera. Cassiano, please.
Good morning, everyone. One more time. It's such a pleasure to have you here in this workshop. I'll try to be brief so that we won't compromise our schedule. So I'm going to talk about women in science, of course. It couldn't be different. So we hope to have the same success as the first edition. We have our subscriptions, they're open. So if you want to enroll until the 4th, you can do this. So I'm trying to remind you to do so. And if you can enroll your institution, we have the resources and the quality. So I believe that is going to be very nice. So there is an award that was instituted with the target of promoting the participation of women in science, technology, and innovation. And by doing so, we recognize their works and also the institutions that are tied to these women who are researchers. So in the first edition, we had a partnership with the Technology Ministry and British Council and CNPq. And I hope that these partnerships can be maintained for a long time. And I believe that hopefully we're going to have a good number on the next edition. And today we have the participation of the representatives of the institutions that were awarded. And it's such a merit, so we can exchange your experiences as institutions. And hopefully we want to have more institutions and other ones on the further editions so that we can share so much other information. So this culture and this practice that you have established, I hope that it can be spread. So I would also like to remind you guys that you took part into a conversation, and hopefully this is going to happen next year as well. Next slide, please. So next meeting is going to be at UFI, and hopefully we're going to be very welcome there. So after these considerations of the first edition, the second one, we included another category, which is the incentive that is destined to young women and people who are participants of the program Asas para o Futuro of the Women Ministry. And we also try to set other categories that are not just age-based. So now we're going to try to see the whole trajectory for how much time they have been there. And to do so, we're trying to adequate these categories in a better way. Sometimes you are further on your experience, your research. So we believe that this is important to separate this way. And we also have the other category, which is based in the stimuli, and the trajectory, which is based in indications and other things. So please, next slide. As I mentioned before, so we have this event among the awarded women of the last edition, and we're also talking about how can we prepare for the other edition. So we have a very high number of subscriptions, higher than the last one. And we want to keep going like this. We want more people to join the project, and we want to see their plans of action as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the subscriptions are open until the 24th of November, and I'm sure that you have enough time so you can enroll your institutions, present your proposals, and also the candidates as well. So make sure to enroll in the categories that are meant to. You can do so at the CNPq platform. And the good part is that you have a financial prize. 345,000 reais is the prize. And there are other benefits as well that some other students mentioned. They commented what the institutions have been doing so far. And sometimes you have resources to take part in the events. So besides the monetary part, which is very important, there are other benefits as well, which can be pleasing for the winners. Next slide, please. So just repeating myself a little bit. Next slide, please. So just to remind you of an important moment, this was during the award ceremony. So I hope that we can have so many of you so that the ceremony can be even more beautiful. So of course, the ones who won the first cannot do the same in the second, but of course, we will have lots of deserving candidates. I think that's it. Thank you so much for being here, for taking part presentially and remotely. Good luck for those who are enrolled. And I believe that now we can have lunch. Thank you. So let's have lunch. So everyone is invited, and during the afternoon we're going to keep going with our works at 2 o'clock. And of course, let's take a picture.
Okay, so just to clear for those that are online, we'll be joining back online at 2 o'clock, so do feel free to go and have some lunch and come back and join us for the afternoon session.